All right. I have no idea if this is real. Normally, Brian and I don't spend a lot of time looking at leaks because when there's false information in them, they cause a lot more harm than the good of revealing them before they were meant to be revealed. But I've skimmed this, and Brian has already watched it, and I believe even recorded a post over on Ginger Prime about it, and said that I should cover this one. And so I'm going to. I just looked over just a couple of quick perusing. Haven't read every single word. And it doesn't have to be real for this to be impactful, because a lot of what I think the frustration toward Blizzard is perception. A game does not drop from being first to being last. A game does not have to... Yeah, a game does not have to drop all the way into the bin and be deleted. Activision doesn't have to shut the servers off for it to be a problem. So while I love and appreciate everything Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft have both brought to the space over their lifetimes, one of them is in a really rough spot. And as people try to throw blame, there's a lot of frustration around World of Warcraft. As a side note, I was enjoying World First coverage last night, and I have not had a chance to check in and see if EU is going to answer back to 5 of 10 from Limit. So let's jump in. Shadowlands is a crap show. Critical response, player drop-off, and just about every engagement metric outside the cash shop have been catastrophic. No higher-up expected this because their "we are too big to fail, and if we build it, they will come" mentality. They refuse to accept their focus on the world being a begrudged mechanic to funnel players to rating is not appealing to the player base at large because it appeals to them. They have spent the last 4 months trying to course correct, but there is no solid direction, and the response to 9.1 has only made things worse. Sylvanas has planned to replace the Arbiter, despite so many people in the company, and God knows how many online saying this would be a total replication of Kerrigan's storyline in StarCraft 2 that killed the non-competitive interest in the brand entirely, and you can only go, no, they will like it eventually, for so many real-world years before it's time to change course. Thus far, that has not happened. I would like to stop and note at this point that World of Warcraft has never hit a low as Final Fantasy 1.0. So to the Final Fantasy players that think World of Warcraft should die because it's gotten this weak, because they think that it cannot be saved from this, Final Fantasy, of every MMO on the market, should know best that there is always a glimmer of hope. There is always a chance for something to literally be reborn. And that when that does happen, if that does happen, it should not be taken for granted and should be cherished. This article is in theory a leak from inside of Blizzard. Doesn't really matter who wrote it. The point is still the same. My understanding is that some of the tweets around this are hit or miss. Some have been deleted. The drama is not necessarily the point. It's that the frustration is hitting a boiling point where you don't have to be chasing drama for this to be impacting you. The elephant in the room is Final Fantasy XIV. To the people in charge, they are acting like this came out of nowhere and don't even seem to understand why it's drawing players away in the tens of thousands. We have all tried to highlight things it is doing that are clearly appealing to an MMO audience, and not, in my opinion, focusing more on mobile game-style retention traps to keep monthly active users and habit-forming personalities logging in. It's not that they don't care. It's just that they just seem so pig-headed and digging their heels in with their fingers in their ears, thinking all the problems will go away because WoW is too big to fail. There will never be real competition, and they will keep coming back. But they aren't coming back anymore. Not in the numbers they used to. There has been a lot of accusations lately around Final Fantasy killing WoW. Final Fantasy did not show up to the race and hide World of Warcraft's equipment. They did not spike their drink. They did not push them over. They did not steal something from them. There is no under-the-table MMO doping scheme that's going to reveal that Final Fantasy was cheating. Final Fantasy has not beaten World of Warcraft because it was stronger, because it was better funded, because it was more experienced. It has not gotten to this point because it had more content. It's not gotten to this point because it doesn't have... It has better backing. Final Fantasy got to this point by showing up and doing what it was supposed to over and over and over. And as World of Warcraft has cut corners, and as World of Warcraft has avoided things that are hard, things like communicating and admitting pain to their community, things like putting out content on time, even when stuff is hard. Things like retaining employees, even when those employees are asking you to change. All Final Fantasy had to do was keep showing up. That was never going to be a sustainable formula. World of Warcraft has had good years and can get back to those, but not without change, not without work. At this point, they've been sitting on the couch eating junk food, complaining, for 4 years. And it's not that they don't care. It's not that people don't take that job for the chance to work on a game they're passionate about. But they're not putting in the work. They're not showing up. And that has given Final Fantasy this incredible timing, where by the mere act of promoting an expansion, which any game would do, it is seen as this incredible act of war. It is seen as this subversive, incredibly effective campaign. But what have they really done here? They paid some content creators to try out their stuff. They put out a marketing campaign. They published content on time. They held some hype events for the fact that they're having new content. It's not really anything crazy. They're not even poaching devs. They're not poaching leadership. They're not moving their publication dates around to have a strategic advantage. They're just showing up. They're not doing anything crazy. We dropped to 1 dungeon per patch. We dropped Ultimate. We've dropped a ton from this expansion. It's not like Final Fantasy is even in the strongest it was hopeful to be. They haven't even hit their own bars. They've had to apologize to their community for not putting out the content at the level that they had intended. You're not seeing Final Fantasy on its brightest day. Shadowbringers is a really good expansion, and Endwalker looks incredible. But for World of Warcraft, like, don't sit here and say, oh, well, they just had a perfect game. They did not have a perfect game. They've had plenty of trials and tribulations. They've had plenty of struggles. They've had tough choices where they had to make a choice between something that players would both like and dislike and something players would both like and dislike, and they picked one, they explained it, and they moved forward. They didn't go hide for 8 months. The people making the spending choices know this. The new model for WoW is market the hell out of an expansion pack for a huge quarter, then use a 6-month lock-ins to pad the numbers for quarter after that. Even if Corona had not happened in 9.1, this would have been dropping after the initial 6-month subs expired to keep the chain holding. The mood in the company is tense, but also very much, it's just a rough transition period. Activision has been pushing hard for Blizzard to release more regular product and to generate more income per user. As far as I know, this is going to be a transition over the next 5 years to a much larger mobile tablet gaming focus. By all accounts, not just WoW, but Overwatch was intended to be the moneymaker in the interim, but once again, somehow had the bright idea to kill a game casual players loved on the altar of esports, hoping for another Brood War. From what I hear, the told you so's were loud, and a lot of people walked beyond Kaplan. The sentiment was shared quietly, in private, but being spoken more often is simply that leadership at Blizzard are not bad people, nor incompetent people, but people who had to fill seats when the old guard jumped ship, whether they were suited for it or not. Brack is a genuinely good man out of his depth. Ian is a fantastic raid designer, put in charge of designing a virtual world he has no interest in or real ideas for, and so on. They have been taking from the roles they excel at to be put in positions where they get to do far less of that purely because there is nobody left with the experience to do so, and the trickle down is a lack of concrete direction, ambition, and focus. There's a concept in corporate bureaucracy that you're always promoted to your lowest level of incompetence, that you succeed at a job, so you're given the next job. You succeed at a job, so you're given the next job. And that continues until you get into a job you're not good at. And then you don't go back down, you stay there. And you have to stay there because your previous job had salary caps. Your previous job had vacation caps. Your previous job, you cannot be demoted without that being a negative thing. And so we will simply promote you until you fail. And if you fail hard enough, we will fire you. So when you have companies this large, one of the long-term things that Blizzard seems to be struggling with, not that we know because they don't tell us anything publicly, is that Yoshi P's team develops talent. They give people room to grow and shift and turn into the people they want to be. We have seen encounter designers say after designing an ultimate, they never want to design another one. And you know what? They don't have to. They don't have to. They can just do something different. And so this kind of cross promotion makes that a lot better running. A business has to function. It has to stay open. A business has to keep the doors open. A business has to make sure that everybody's paychecks are paid on time. Nobody wants to work for a boss that isn't going to make sure that the lease gets paid and that the bank doesn't come knocking 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 5 years from now. But there has to be a balance. You need somebody that can look at the numbers and say, this is what's working, this is what's not, this is what we can afford to leverage as risk, this is where we feel that our strengths lie. And then you have to have people who are just making art. That is what this game is. It's an art. And there are logical people who find joy in poring over this and providing that value. And there are people that are just the opposite of them. And they can work together, but you have to have leadership that can make these things relate. There is no way that Yoshi P is not in meetings with Square Enix talking about, if you want to get this thing to 30 million players, if you want to open an oceanic data center, if you want this game to ever be on another platform such as Xbox, if you want to invest in these big systems, we're going to need to see a return on what you use. When you borrow money from Square Enix that we could be using to develop another title, doesn't matter if it was made off 14. That's a return from a previous investment. But when we make money off 14 and you say, I need more to keep the game going, the size of that check is a business meeting. It's not a, whatever it costs, man, have a good time. There are real choices. When do they staff up? How do they scale? When do they make technological improvements? Those are real choices. They cost real money. And that real money could have gone somewhere else. And it matters. But Yoshi P has said to his dev team, just so you know, your bonus will not be based off the Metacritic score. There is no way Square Enix leadership was like, yeah, we're not even going to pay attention to reviews or acceptance. We're not going to use metrics at all because we just want you to make something you're proud of. No. They're aware of Metacritic scores. They're aware of sales records. They're aware of monthly active users. They're aware of these things. But you can separate making a game you're proud of and those things. You can put people in charge who are good at the art, and then you can leverage that financially. They can both happen. The frustration here is when that barrier gets broken, and it's a tough spot. I've been in sales, which is the art side. Everybody in the company thinks we're just doing whatever we want. And my best managers are people I do not envy, because they are the barrier. They're the barrier between the people running the business and those of us out just going to lunch all day, which is what everybody thinks sales is. When you see somebody whose job it is to make the content, their job is to go and generate something out of thin air, it's not a straightforward process. It can be results driven, but you have to understand it's not an A to B. But it takes a manager that can see both sides of it and is usually underpaid and overworked to sit in between two people that both are frustrated that they're crossing wavelengths. A highly paid management team that just wants to see the business succeed based on the metrics that are informing them. And as a total compensation, a highly paid business development team that's generating the goods, products, services. Both sides are going to feel they should be paid better. And in many cases, there are individuals on those teams that should be. But somewhere in the middle is a management team, who I don't care if they were paid more than both of them combined, it's not enough. And it's not, by the way. Those middle people are not paid that way. And they sit in the middle in any industry, and they bridge that gap. I don't know that World of Warcraft has a set of people that are qualified and given the resources to succeed in that position. It's part of Ian's job. It's what I think Yoshi P and the team that helps plan out. You know, we've met some of them in second portions of live letters and interviews. These people that make the plans. They don't go to the artists and say, well, how many days in the next month do you think you're going to feel inspired? How many days do you think you're going to want to be here? How many days are you not going to be coming here because, you know, you've got a pet or, you know, that's sick, or a family member that needs you to pick them up at the airport later? I need to know those days because I have to write that down. No. I know that this is a loose process, and I'm looking at general trends, and I'm making a plan. They have every day and every month there are deadlines. Not based on passion, not based on love, based on deliverables, based on getting the patch out the door. Final Fantasy does not publish a patch when they feel it's ready, when they feel it's really good. They release the patch regardless, and then they built an infrastructure that guarantees that it can be good inside those constraints. The patches come out regularly. We don't have 2 patch expansions. We don't have them. It's not just passion. So Final Fantasy is not doing anything that World of Warcraft should not also be doing. They're not doing anything crazy. 2021 has seen the player base, media, and gaming at large turn on WoW to a degree that I don't think leads in their positivity dojo bubble considered possible. It's gone from people going, this is how Blizzard needs to fix WoW, to WoW is no longer salvageable, time for greener pastures. And I think on some level this was never considered a possibility, so there have never been any major plans beyond the usual try and minimize player drop-off by arranging releases around competitors launching updates and products. The official forums being filled with talk of Final Fantasy XIV, and worse, why do we actually pay a sub, hasn't helped. This is really where I struggle with Shadowlands, because it's a live service model, and so it is a subscription-based model. And when I talk about the pros of a subscription in context of games like Guild Wars 2, where I think they would benefit from one, WoW's not being a good steward of it. It's a really big struggle, because what I pay for is continued updates, and so when I don't get updates, I don't know what I'm paying for. I already bought the expansion, so if you're not going to update it, why am I paying you? So that you can have servers? Lots of games will give me access to servers. So that I can avoid microtransactions? Every MMO has microtransactions now, 14 and WoW included. All of them. What am I paying for? I'm not getting the premier garden that I expect. And so it is a valid complaint. Brian asked me recently, what would it take for you to quit WoW? I don't think I would quit. Outright. I think what would happen at first is I would stop subscribing 12 months out of 12. I would start saying, I'll subscribe for 3 months every patch, which turns out would have saved me a lot of money in the last year. That quickly drops to, I'll subscribe if there's something in the patch I want to do. And that quickly drops to, oh, I didn't even know they had a patch this week. Is it good? There is a huge problem with the fact that they have been so far in the front that they haven't had to check the rearview mirror. They haven't had to look back for a long time. Final Fantasy was rumored to have passed WoW right before Classic dropped. But then Classic was so widely successful that you can just cover it up. You've got love again. It's all good. But TBC Classic did not have that same fervor. So it's back to the grind again. There has been some testing the waters lately from certain higher-ups, and if we can remove the line, no king rules forever, read into that what you will. There are still arguments going on about Kalthos' voice actor. I don't know much about it, but it's heated. Wouldn't be the first time a knee-jerk reaction only seemed to generate bad press. We lost a noticeable amount of PvP engagement after the Swifty thing. The Preach interview was treated as a disaster, and there was talk of more strongly vetting interviewers for bad actors and only engaging with a list of questions Blizzard provides. Some pointed out that it could be used to create some form of fireside chat akin to the Final Fantasy XIV live letters, but that fell on deaf ears. Every time they've tried engaging with the community, the moment the community has lashed back, I feel the Preach interview was incredibly good faith. Incredibly good faith. If you watch Preach's post-show where he went back and says, I wish I'd phrased this question differently, but Blizzard said they wanted to talk about this subject, so I figured by broaching it, they would just handle it. You see, like, Preach loves World of Warcraft. It was incredibly good faith. So if you're going to cut Preach from that list, I don't know who you're going to get outside of just Blizzard employees. Like, you would need somebody to be on staff, pre-recorded, vetted prior to being pushed out. To make sure, and they're missing the point. The live letters are not about Yoshi P never saying anything that we were mad about. The live letters and the 3 fan fests surrounding an expansion and all the interviews he gives are not because every time he answers a question, the community's happy. There are times they're incredibly frustrated at a response. It happens. And his response is to say, okay, why are they frustrated? Are they frustrated because I phrased it poorly? If so, I need to get better at communicating. Are they frustrated because of the response? Okay, do we need to reevaluate that response, or do we need to just tell them, I'm sorry, this is just how it is? It's because of that back and forth. Yoshi P is going to have a media tour this September. Last media tour, I want to say he gave somewhere between like 30 and 40 interviews. Around fan fests, he's usually giving, let's say, half a dozen other interviews. We get a minimum of 2 live letters per patch, but we also have other ones around other events, hyping up expansions and so on. We oftentimes get interviews around events like E3. It would not be crazy to me to think that Yoshi P is in contact with this community in a direct and transparent way 100 times a year. That's not twice a week. It's in intervals that make sense to him. It's in intervals that when he has the time and when he's selling something to build up to the release of something. The same thing WoW does, which is fine. They're not all pre-vetted questions, but some are. Some of the Q&As are pre-vetted. The most recent one was not. It's not about pre-vetted. It's about practice. The answer is not, well, I tried to show up and play a game. I hadn't stretched, I hadn't warmed up, and I'd never played the game before, and I did bad. There is this concept of if something is worth doing well, if something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. That's not the whole phrase. That's not an accurate representation of life. If something is worth doing, it's worth doing well. If something is worth doing well, it's worth doing poorly, on the path to doing well. That's the second half. You have to have the second half. You cannot look at somebody that's been doing something 100 times, 200 times, 10,000 times more than you. The 10,000 hour rule is 10,000 hours of intentional practice. Intentional practice, seeking improvement. So when you give one interview in a year and it goes poorly, 2 interviews in a year, whatever Ian gives, 3, 4, what's he spending? 4 hours a year handling interviews? Preach was given topics. Go ahead, create your fireside chat. You've missed the point. The point is not the interaction between Ian and Mike. The point is not, well, Final Fantasy's just lucky because they have these broadcasts. Those are live. Those are live. We've had sound issues, technical issues. They are very live. Very, very live. Yoshi P in a recent one kind of joked offhand, and I don't think it was that much of a joke, that he didn't intend to reveal that much about Final Fantasy 16 because he'd prepped for a Final Fantasy 14 event, and the other dev on the stage kind of baited him into answering a 16 question. And then when he turned it around and said, "What are you going to reveal?" the guy said, "Oh yeah, I'm not talking about anything." And Yoshi P was like, "You mean I revealed more about 16 than you did about your game?" They're live. So if you think not having an interview like Preach, where we have set topics and he's going to keep you on topic and be respectful of your time, if you think doing this without a driver is going to make it better, it's not. I'm not saying don't do it though. I'm saying you're going to have to be bad at it before you're good at it. I don't know what to tell you. You should have started 10 years ago. The two sentiments right now among the team are either we really need a win, or there's a dedicated cabal of internet trolls out there to kill WoW. Right now, we are crunching hard to get 9.2 ready to wrap up the Jailer storyline so we can get an expansion out early 2022. If that doesn't happen, there are talks of major shakeups coming down from Activision that have been threatened for a few years now. It's all hands on deck feeling that's been around to some degree since the "is this an out-of-season April Fool's joke" BlizzCon. A make-or-break deadline is coming closer, and things like Diablo 4 were not at all planned before then. Blizzard needs a significant win, not just in initial profit, but consumer goodwill. Nobody likes working at what the public now seems to see as the bad guy of the MMO industry. This has also made new hires decline. Not significantly, but the "you want Blizzard on your resume" line doesn't seem to have the appeal that it used to. This has led to more hiring via friend of a friend, to some rumblings about nepotism, and people severely lacking in experience because they get great Twitter optics. At this point, because they've chosen not to make their player base partners in this development, because they've chosen not to communicate with them in a way that makes this seem like a relationship, because they've chosen to keep it distantly professional, where it is a retailer and a consumer, there is only perception. That is all that matters. In an actual relationship, there's a chance to explain yourself. It's not what it looks like. I think you misunderstood. I'd like to rephrase. I was just having a bad day. Can we start that over? I'm sorry about that. Can you tell me what upset you about it? Because I'd like to do better. But those are phrases used in a relationship, not a consumer. I don't need anything from Starbucks or McDonald's, my local grocery store. And so if they screw something up, I can just go somewhere else. I have no relationship with them. I'm not invested in what they're doing. I have no idea what their corporate attitude on a certain subject is. A fast food joint is a fast food joint the vast majority of the time, and when it's not, it's typically for a bad reason. So if you want to put yourself in the retailer position, that's fine. You can do that. But you're giving up the pros of having a loyal fan base. Nobody's out there to kill you. If there are people willing to talk about your game, it's because they think it can get better. What's scary right now is that they're not talking about your game. What's scary right now is that there are people saying, I need you to translate for me in 14 from WoW, because that's the terminology I need, but I don't really want to talk about WoW. Hadn't really followed 9.1. I don't think I was going to watch the World First Race this time. What's scary is when they stop talking. When all this drama dies down, and we stop talking about WoW altogether. That's the real danger. On the topic of Twitter, we are now being told to disengage from it. Yeah. Multiple employees like Nervig and Oliski publicly attacking paying customers because they got too heated and couldn't keep quiet is bad press that could have been avoided. An email reminder has gone out around more than once lately stating, if you're not customer relations, you should not be representing the company to customers, especially if you cannot remain professional. Lastly, the big elephant in the room is your boy Asmongold. The new hires cannot stand him. They have used terms like toxic masculinity and dog whistles to the dangerous males. While some of the oldest crowd still remaining have called him based or telling it like it is, which has led to friction, to put it mildly. People are told not to talk about him, and the recent Final Fantasy XIV stuff only made it all the worse. The idea that an outside element can have such an effect on the product genuinely upsets people. Like Zack is engaging in some malicious act of cyber warfare. Many of us have pointed out the now famous quotes by Naoki Yoshida about understanding that players will drift, and we need to make something worth coming back to. Because they want to. But some people, for lack of a better word, see our customers, or consumers, as they refer to them nowadays, as some type of antagonistic relationship, where the goal is not being an entertainer, putting on a show for a crowd, but some kind of game hunter, trying to trap a large, profitable kill. I wish I could blame Activision for this, but this is a sentiment from more of the younger crowd than the tech boomers. Which personal opinion is probably why so many folks like Metzen and Morheim left. I don't even think Asmongold's being paid. I bet Asmongold could have reached out to Square and said how much, and they would have cashed a check. No questions asked. I don't think he's being paid. I don't think there's anything malicious about it. He's still playing WoW some days. I think OTK didn't cover the World First Race because last time it turned out to be more than it was worth, and I think they didn't go back to it, and that makes sense. I think for a first attempt at the event, the production quality and what they were attempting to do and making it into a real show and not just a let's watch 27,000 million pulls back to back, made it much more consumable to a non-rating demographic, and that was awesome. But they didn't choose to cover it this time around. I think that much of the WoW community doesn't like Zack. Having 50,000, 200,000, a million fans is nothing compared to the 115 million people that have played WoW, or whatever the number's up to. He's one of many, and he's the largest, and so it's a great barometer, right? It's the canary in the mine. Final Fantasy XIV, if it were in really rough shape, and we saw Zepla and Happy jump ship, if we saw Spofi jump ship, that would be alarming. That'd be alarming. Not because them playing should affect you playing, but because they built an entire life around their passion for this game. They have found a way to make that sustainable even when they're having a rough time in their personal lives. They have found a way to make this game a place of joy that exceeds the game itself. Where when you talk to them one-on-one, players like this have said things along the lines of, there are probably times I would have taken breaks or I wouldn't be playing 14 if it weren't for the community. They've built something much larger than the game. So for them to leave the game, they're also having to leave whatever that is. They're having to leave whatever community they're a part of in that space, and they don't get to take it all with them. They get to take some of it with them, but not all of it. So for somebody like Zeppler happy to leave 14 would be a big deal. It'd be a huge deal. If it were anything but personal reasons and they just dropped off the radar and they just popped up playing the same number of hours, generating the same amount of content for a different game, it would be enormous. That doesn't mean it should drive what your dev cycle is. That doesn't mean it should drive everything you do. But it is a public-facing barometer. You can't always tell, even with an exit interview, why a player quit. Did they quit because they got too busy? Did they quit because they got a new job? Did they quit because their computer broke? Did they quit because they're tight on cash? They want to play another game. Their friends are playing other games. I've quit games I liked. I liked ESO on launch. Many people didn't. I liked ESO on launch, and I quit because my friends quit. Still looks like a quit. So when you look at metrics, it's really hard to gauge what any one consumer is doing. So you have to look at these big trends of data. The problem with those is you forget the individual. You forget that these are real people. But content creators is a unique perspective to take one person and go listen. Now be aware, they are only one. Zach is only one. But their popularity should say, okay, not all of their views are totally insane out of left field, even if you disagree with them, even if they're wrong, even if they're objectively, measurably wrong. If they are saying, I believe this is what's going on in the game, and you see that video taking off, and it's comments of, thank you, yes, I agree, it doesn't matter that it's wrong, because clearly you've dropped the ball that a wrong idea can get that much traffic. Before you ask, yes, the topic of wokeness has shown up in group talks. It's not all some grand SJW conspiracy. People really do want people to feel welcome and represented. However, we need everything vetoed by people not working on it to see if it's inoffensive and bland enough. Rubs some of us the wrong way. Like anything in life, you can take something too far and lose sight of the core ideals. And everything gone on since Blitzchung, it feels like people are forming little factions to pull people in different directions and decide what Blizzard's identity is now. And how to appeal to new players. There has been some drop-offs with go woke, go broke as the only answer in the survey when unsubbing. But honestly, we are losing subs in unforeseen numbers anyways, and still making more money than ever through the cash shop heavy users, so it doesn't make an impact. All in all, things are rough right now. Blizzard doesn't have the love of the customers anymore, is no longer treated like an industry giant. While D4, D2R, and Immortal aren't going to kill Diablo, even if they fail, the sentiment for World of Warcraft and Overwatch 2 are a lot more tense and stressful. The phrase, it might be good to brush up on your mobile development portfolio if we get another underperformer, has been doing the rounds a lot. If Shadowlands continues its stark decline and Overwatch 2 is looking to underperform like its current projections suggest, I think the Blizzard of a few years from now will be imitating King a lot more than trying to learn from any lessons from Square Enix's MMO division. Turning your tail and running won't work. Blizzard's not qualified to take on King. They could cash it in for 5, 10, maybe 15 years, which from a quarterly perspective and a shareholder perspective might not be a bad thing to consider. Is it time to just sell off the brand? But that's what you're doing. So if you feel passionate about what the art is here, King being the mobile developer underneath the Activision umbrella, that should not be the direction you go. But to learn lessons from Square Enix would be hard, because when you look to Square Enix, there is no, oh well, they're cheating. They're doing the equivalent of roiding up. They paid a judge. There's no shortcut method that Square Enix took to get here. There's been no news, evidence, rumor, or anything hinting at anything that Square Enix has done to unfairly get an advantage. They're winning on fundamentals. So it's July going into August. CrossFit Games are going on. Most of you probably don't watch that, but it's an interest of mine. I've always found it fascinating to watch. If you get your butt beat in the CrossFit Games, you don't get to go accuse the other person of roiding up. You get to sit down and realize that over the last year, they just worked harder than you. They just worked harder. They sweat. They worked till it sucked. They had a long-term goal and were passionate about that goal, but it didn't matter on a day-to-day if they were passionate. You don't wake up today and go, well, I don't really feel like working hard, so I'm just not going to work at all. You show up. One of my issues with people saying that Final Fantasy is successful because it's passion is because it's insulting. From my perspective, I would never want to stand up after a life's achievement. I would never want to stand up after a major career milestone and be told that it was the fact that I cared that got me there. Because it won't be. It won't be that every day was easy. It won't be that care alone got me there. It won't be that care even set me apart from the people that I beat out. Care is not that much of an isolated thing. You won't get there without care, but care is not a precursor. It does not guarantee success. You have to show up. You have to do the work. And that doesn't mean just the easy work. That doesn't mean just your favorites. That means the things that suck. As a content creator, I have some big projects coming up, and I'm gonna have to edit them. I don't like the editing process. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It takes a ton of energy. I'm not good at it. How else does it get made? Now, when separating out game studios, you can take the non-passionate ones and you can just toss them out. They'll never make it to the top. They'll never make it. But in that remaining group, just like if you separate out people with good genes, with good resources, right? And you say those are the people that are going to become professional athletes. Okay, let's separate out only the ones who care about the game. Those are going to be the ones that are going to become professional athletes. Fine. That group probably does contain the professional athletes, but it doesn't only contain the professional athletes. There are people that cared for the game, had good genetics, right? Probably even ones that worked hard, but life just didn't work out. There's a fair bit of luck at the end. It takes all of it. And simply having the ingredients isn't a guarantee. I can promise you that people dealing with this at Blizzard and not quitting, that's a passion for what they're doing. Why else would they be there? It's not because the pay is amazing. It's not because their public reputation's on fire. It's not because they're just crushing game dev right now. It's not because they're getting to put out content that players are rejoicing in. It's because they care about what they do. What sets Final Fantasy apart is not the fact that they care. What sets them apart is that they've been willing to show up even on the days they don't care. They have a breakup, a death in the family, car trouble, food, they get sick. Doesn't matter what it is, they show up. They show up on the days they don't feel like it. Because there is a permanent, lasting, burning desire to make something they're proud of. A passion that rivals the word love. Where it's not about always liking or disliking the person. It's an ongoing commitment that you're agreeing to work at it. You are agreeing to put in the effort and show up. Even on the days that it frustrates you. Even on the days that it's hard. Even on the days you'd rather do something else. Final Fantasy XIV puts in the work. And the hard thing for World of Warcraft when you read things like this is that while I do believe they can turn around, as a Final Fantasy fan, I cannot understand how people don't give them that chance. 1.0 is way worse in every way than any single day Blizzard has ever had World of Warcraft in. It can turn around. But the hard thing to swallow here is how much work it's going to take. Because they're going to have to do the work of tomorrow, but they're going to have to go back and do the work of yesterday. They're going to have to pull double duty. And that's not just hours. That's not just crunch. That's tough decisions. It might mean there's some turnover. It might. It will guaranteed mean there's a culture shift. A lot of it's probably going to suck. But if they want something that they can be proud of, a legacy, and not just a cash cow, if they want to do what Final Fantasy is doing, who is getting cash, not because they chased cash, but because they built something worth supporting, they're going to have to show up. Not just hire people that like the game and are passionate. Not just hire people that are talented at their jobs. Not just make them work 1,000,000 hours. But all of it. All of it. And then some. They're going to have a direction. And they're going to have to communicate with their fans. Because it's going to be a journey. And they're going to need to communicate, here's where we're at. And it's not where we want to be. And here's where we're going. They're going to have to be willing to say that. And it doesn't matter if they say it to Mike and they feel he's the reason that people don't receive it well, or if they go say it on their own website and it's not received well. Shadowlands is not doing poorly because of Activision. Shadowlands is not doing poorly because of Asmongold, or because of Preach, because of Ian. It's not just one thing. If it was, remove the one thing, it's fixed. It's not the one thing. It's a massive, massive list of problems. And not all of them are in their control, and that's fine. Fix the ones that are. Start there. Ian recently in an interview was asked, with Preach, what do you think about the balance, right? We have this huge delta in people at the top end of gearing versus people a little bit further down the curve. And he suggested that the people further down the curve needed to put in the work. They need to get better. They need to get good. That it's not just a gearing thing. That they're just going to have to learn to play better. Learn to play better, Blizzard. It's not just a gearing thing. It's a tough industry. You made it to the top off of incredible work. Off of building a world that we could not wait to go spend time in. When's the last time you wanted to go spend time in the open world? In the World of Warcraft? When's the last time you really felt hungry to get off work? Hearthstone came out of a internally tested app that they had to send out an email to tell players, to tell employees to stop playing because it was actually hurting company-wide productivity. When's the last time World of Warcraft hurt company-wide productivity? Get back to making something you want to play. Honestly, at this point, you're reading the analytics so poorly, maybe you just shouldn't be reading them at all. Maybe you should swing for the fences and just make the game you want to make. Go out there, play a bunch of other games, get a feel for what's working, and ask yourself, if you had the level of resources to make an MMO from the ground up and launch it off an existing MMO, what would you do? That's what A Realm Reborn came out of. Not analytics, not engaged player. They shut 1.0 off. It came out of, we played a lot of games, we think that we like some of the stuff they're doing. Let's take what we do well, and let's make something we're proud of. It wasn't perfect. We're not asking for what you do to be perfect. But if you got to chase something that feels more than just a game, kinda.